right, let's start with the collapse of the pylons in Pretoria. It's not only led to the temporary closure of the N4 highway since reopened, but also cut power to over 30 areas in Tshwane. Some of those areas have now been restored, but it's certainly going to take some time to get all affected suburbs back online. This afternoon, the Electricity Minister, Dr. Tshwane Mayor, met with the Mayor at the site of the pylon collapse, pledging to work with the city to help restore power. Well, I'm joined now by the Mayor himself, Cilliers Brink. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you've been very hesitant to create false hope and give timelines, but given the progress so far, take us through what's been achieved so far and what still has to be done, which may give us some idea of how long it's going to take.
Right. So, Sally, thanks very much for the opportunity. The roads have been cleared, as you mentioned, which is quite important. Those lines have been secured. We have obtained way leaves from the various different agencies that is required to work on the areas where the pylons will be replaced. The redesign of the pylons has been completed. They will be replaced by what is called, in technical terms, monopoles, which is explained to me as very similar to a cell phone tower. And initially I thought, not being an engineer, that this would be a temporary structure, but the advice is that the structure would be permanent, and in fact it will be more resilient to criminal attack and possible vandalism. So the procurement of what needs to be procured, the monopoles, is at an advanced stage. Eskom is assisting us, but we're also talking to the manufacturer of those poles. Now, I mentioned these details because there are so many steps that still have to be taken and so many contingencies that it becomes incredibly difficult to give a credible timeline. But what I do want to say is that we're getting excellent cooperation from Eskom, from their technical teams. As I met with Minister Ramokgopa, I also expressed appreciation for how Eskom is assisting the city. And we also discussed the need for the South African police to assist us with securing the network and also with maintaining order and public safety during this very difficult time. So we're not in a position to give a credible timeline. The risk of giving a timeline now and us discovering some other fault or some other contingency is that we will create an even bigger breach of trust than this prolonged power outage.
Fair enough. You said that getting those monopoles is at an advanced stage. You're speaking to the manufacturers. Eskom's helping you too. Do you have a timeline at least on that? Bearing in mind that obviously they still then have to be installed. But do you know how long that in itself will take?
So that will be in a matter of days. We are already have indication that the poles are available with suppliers and with Eskom. And Sally, I just have to mention one other incident, and I wasn't aware of this being absolutely focused on the Tshwane situation or the attack on our infrastructure. But apparently yesterday, there was a pylon of Eskom that collapsed over the R101, also in Tshwane. So that was an attack on Eskom infrastructure. And some of the supplies that Eskom were going to share with us now has to be used on that project. I mentioned that just to highlight the extent of the criminal attack on our infrastructure. But as to your more specific question, procuring the supplies will be a matter of days. As I mentioned, we've already made significant progress with permission and designs and so forth.
So you have been able to restore power to some people in Pretoria. How was that made possible?
So about 40% of the areas affected by the initial power outage, which I must mention, about 300 megawatts of electricity supply was knocked out when those pylons collapsed. About 40% of the areas have been reconnected. But I have to stress that this is largely a temporary solution. And how that has been achieved is by backfeeding, which is basically to supply electricity from areas not affected, to channel that electricity, if I can use the non-engineering term, to supply those areas temporarily. But I do have to stress that even in these areas, power might still be disrupted. as work continues on the permanent solution, which is to get that 132 kV line restored, to get those monopoles up, and to restore power to the whole of Tshwane.
I've been trying to get a sense of just how much of Tshwane has been affected by this. So 300 megawatts knocked out. How much does the whole city normally need in terms of power?
Goodness, Sally, I don't want to be like certain other mayors and give answers that I will later regret. So I'm not going to venture into answering that question, but my understanding that 300 megawatt is significant. It is significant. So a massive area. It's not just the east of Pretoria, Mamelodi, Eersterus, but also parts of the Moot, the center of Pretoria, parts of the north, and even in Centurion, where some of these power outages have affected residents. I also want to mention that obviously Watloo, a very important industrial area for the city, is also affected, and the BMW plant at Roslyn, which just adds urgency to the work that needs to be done. We've also had wastewater treatment facilities affected, and that's why it was so very important for us to start restoring as much of the area that has been affected as is possible, because this is not just affecting industry, electricity, income for the city, it's also affecting secondary services such as sewage reticulation.
I have to ask a quick question. So does that mean that residents who are facing this prolonged outage should, as we see with intense levels of load shedding, prepare themselves for water supply problems as well?
So that is one of the issues that we're discussing with the management of the city. There's no clear indication yet that there will be water supply issues. In the past, when the city has experienced water supply issues, was because of prolonged stage 6 load shedding in areas where Rand Water operates. So Rand Water, as the bulk supplier of the city, was affected. And in this instance, I do not think that Rand Water as such is affected. It is more the users of the water that are affected. But it is one of the issues that we're monitoring. We're also monitoring, as I mentioned, reticulation, but also the safety of the infrastructure that is now not in use. And I have repeatedly instructed the city manager to make sure that our Metro Police is out there securing facilities. But obviously the support of the South African police is also crucial.
Who's in charge of this pylon? You mentioned that the pylon that collapsed further away falls under Eskom. Who's in charge of these pylons?
So the ones in Tshwane is the City of Tshwane. That is our responsibility.
So I want to just bring up some images, and I know that you're aware of this. You said yesterday you'd be looking into it. But these are images on social media. They were posted apparently in October by someone who very clearly showed that the bottom struts of those pylons had been ripped away. And this person, who's got an engineering background, and you can see in those pictures just how much has been taken away from that sort of cross-hatching structure, said, guys, this is an accident waiting to happen. Was the city aware of this in October, and did they take any action?
So, as I mentioned in previous interviews, I don't want to dismiss this post out of hand to say that, no, this is not Tshwane, this is some other place. I think it is really important that we investigate the source of that post. And part of what I've asked for are the maintenance schedules on these pylons, because there was clearly a criminal attack. But there is the possibility that inadequate maintenance and repairs was a contributing factor. I have asked the city manager to look into this. There is indication from some sources that this might not be the area that was affected, but I don't want to dismiss it out of hand.
Fair enough. I have to ask, though, I just have to jump in. I mean, surely it's very easy to establish if these are the same pylons. You have a look at the pylon at the base and go, oh, look, there's so much missing. I mean, have you noticed that there's clear struts missing in those downed pylons?
Yes. So the inspections that I have done, and I must stress that I haven't walked the entire line of all 7 pylons that collapsed, but the ones that I have been able to inspect certainly did not have all of those struts.
All right. So then I have to ask, surely did the city not fail in its duty regarding looking after these pylons?
So I think, Sally, as I mentioned, criminality played a part, but I don't want to exclude the possibility that there was inadequate maintenance. And that's why I think we must have an investigation. I'm not dismissing any of these claims out of hand. There must be an investigation. We must look at the maintenance schedules. And if that is found to be the case, obviously in October last year, I was not in a position to receive any of these complaints. I was not yet in office.
Sure.
If we do find that the city was responsible, there must certainly be action.
All right. Thank you very much. We look forward to finding out exactly what's going to happen if indeed there was a failure to act on the part of the city of Pretoria. Thank you.